So I want to introduce our next speaker, Julia Samuel. Her talk is entitled Eros and Thanatos, Love, Grief, and the Forces That Shape Us. We met at a conference that I did with Alain de Botton about 8-9 years back in London, and it was instant. She's a leading UK psychotherapist, and the primary book that Julia is known for is Grief Works, followed by This Too Shall Pass, and her latest book that I think is fantastic is that Every Family Has a Story. She has a podcast, Therapy Works. Please help me welcome Julia Samuel.
Morning, everyone. What a privilege and joy to be here, and thank you so much, Esther. You are also quite a tough act to follow, I have to say. So, as Esther said, I've been a psychotherapist specializing in grief for 35 years. And as Esther illustrated today, we all carry... Oh, where's the black thing? Oh, here we go. We all carry the stories that led us to become the therapists that we are today. And my story was that as a child, is this clicking? There we go. I was surrounded by these black and white photographs. I didn't know who these people were until I was a teenager, where I learned that my grandfather had died of cancer, that my mother's mother had died of liver disease, that the man here was my uncle who was killed in Arnhem in the war, and that the woman here was my aunt, Aileen, who died of an asthma attack. My mother's entire family had died by the time she was 25. And my father, his father died of a heart attack on the Queen Mary, and his brother died in a dentist chair by the time my father was 27. But in such significant losses, so traumatic, but in my family, we didn't talk about them, not a word. And if we did talk about them, they were minimized. There's a classic from my mother who was talking about one of her few beloved relations, Martin, who had died, and she rang me and she said, "Darling, I planted Martin today." And that was her code that she's been to his funeral. So, as you can imagine, I inherited the emotional work my parents actually couldn't do. They didn't have that capacity. And understanding what I'd inherited, how it had shaped me, has taken many years, and it's an ongoing process. But it is certainly no surprise that professionally I have dedicated my practice to supporting those in grief, thinking about grief, and understanding the grief process. So what have I learned? Love and loss, life and death. We can't have one without the other. That is the deal. It is the contract we are all born into. And yet, as a culture, we try to fix death as if it's a problem to solve rather than a reality to face. Many of us speak of it in the abstract, like it happens to people over there who pass away or get lost. And we very rarely confront our own personal reality that we will die, or think about our own extinction. Saying that word and looking at your faces, I feel like I'm the party pooper, like saying the thing that no one wants to hear. But hear me out. we tend to think that grief begins with death. But really, grief begins the moment we sense something precious slipping away. Grief begins with love. When a person, a pet, a dream, a way of life is ending, knowing this won't last is where grief takes root. And here Thanatos and Eros come into view, two forces inextricably linked. Eros, the god of love, Thanatos, the Greek spirit of death, in Freud's terms, the life instinct and the death instinct. And the two are totally two sides of the same coin. Thanatos enters the moment something ends. Sometimes he slips in quietly and closes the door. Sometimes he storms in and breaks everything that has come before. Sometimes he is welcome, a relief from the suffering. Thanatos is in our therapy rooms and in ourselves. He's in the person that cannot cry. He's the one that sabotages their own joy. He's not just Freud's death drive. He's every instinct we have to withdraw from hope, from change, and from the unknown. It's when we stick to the familiar pain, having that attachment to suffering, and not let it change us, that we get locked in it. I remember very recently I had a client who told me, I've been running from the death of my parents for 7 years, and then burst into tears because it was a relief. She realized that in running from it, she was locked in it. Because we all have this emotional bandwidth. We have pain one end and joy the other end. When we block the pain, we incrementally block the joy. And then we live in this very narrow bandwidth, scrolling on our text, numbing. But we can't access the joy because we have blocked the pain. Because pain is crucially a portal. Trying to make this thing work. Can someone do it for me? I'm pressing the green one, right? Is it there? Oh, it's there. It's not on here. Because pain is crucially a portal. Paradoxically, it is by allowing ourselves to feel the pain that we heal, not blocking it. Pain is the agent of change. If you only take one thing from what I'm saying, I want you to take that. To allow our pain through our systems, grief is embodied, and sometimes it is unbearable, and it takes longer than we want. But our task is not to banish Thanatos, for when we are supported to face the reality as it is and allow the pain, we may, over time, find our way back to Eros. At the heart of the paradox, where Thanatos is, Eros is nearby. Eros, as Esther talked about so powerfully, the force of life, desire, connection, and becoming. For when the pain releases, we may find instinctively ourselves asking, what is to be born? When we release the pain, we can dare to invite ourselves to find new ways to love, to connect, to build, and to imagine. Eros connects us to the parts that say, I want to live, I want to matter, I want to love. Thanatos and Eros work together in partnership, not in opposition. And of course, as we've said so much yesterday and today, we cannot do this alone. When something or someone significant dies, it is only through the love of others that we are able to survive. So now turning to you, to ourselves, as individuals and therapists, in the broader context that we've been talking about, can you think for just a moment, what are the losses that you have been experiencing? Just give yourselves a few moments to jot them down, think about them. You could probably take a really long time, but I don't have a really long time. I call this new layer of suffering living losses. These griefs accumulate and shape our psyche. How do we manage when we are saturated? The answer is simple and challenging. We must do our own grieving. We need to do it individually, and we need to do it collectively. If we don't, we become unavailable to ourselves, to our families, to our communities, to our clients, and to the life waiting for us in the future. So here is the paradox again. By feeling our pain, we heal. And we resist. And I think the key thing I got from yesterday is that needing to numb and resist the discomfort is what holds us in the discomfort. But pain is the messenger. It tells us something has changed, and we must change too. Grief is not just a feeling. Grief is a form of learning. We are wired to adapt. We are wired to change. Our mind is a learning machine. If we let it take in the data, grief updates our map. It tells us the world has altered. Our life before is gone. And we must change too. Mental health is living in the reality as it is, not as we wish it to be, not as it was. Over time, the avoidance we do to not feel the pain does us harm individually, it does it harm to our families, transgenerationally, and I think really globally and collectively. So how do we grieve? A side note, as Jack knows, trauma is not naturally adaptive, so that needs to be addressed before the grieving process. So how do we grieve? The model that I find most helpful is the dual process. It's from Strawberry and Shoot, and what that talks about is it's the movement between loss orientation that you can think of as Thanatos and restoration orientation that you can think of as Eros, and then we oscillate between the two and allow the two. Over time, we incrementally adjust. And it isn't an immersion process, so it's really intentionally going to loss, giving it some time to feel the pain, and then intentionally giving ourselves a break from the pain and moving towards being restorative. And also to recognize we don't forget and move on. We don't get over grief. we accommodate it. We build our life around it. And I've developed these 8 pillars of strength. And they're not like in the newspapers, like, these 8 things and you're going to get sorted. These are more like attitudes, habits, and beliefs that when we feel like we've got this black hole that is sucking us into the ground, developing your own toolbox from these pillars of strength can help you process your grief. So I'm going to say it very quickly. The first one is relationship with the person or the life that has died. And the main thing about that is to recognize we have to face the reality of their death, but the love never dies. That the continuing love through bonds to that connection, through memory, stays with us and influences us as we move forward with our life. And our relationship with ourselves. People who grieve, I think, have what I call a shitty committee. You have this horrible, critical voice that says to you, you're not doing it right, get over it, don't make a fuss, or hates everybody and then are a bad person, the version of yourself you don't want to be. So being kind to yourself in that Christian Neff term of being self-compassionate is absolutely key. And time warps when we're grieving. We have a longing for the past and a fear of the future. I think the Greek term of kairos time, felt time, rather than chronological time, so kairos time is what feels right, is the clock we need to be following. And as we've talked about a lot, the mind-body connection and emotional regulation, I put them together. We are bodies, beings, and whatever we put into our system affects our system. So what we watch, who we see, whether we move, what we eat, what we drink, all of that will affect our system. And I want you to choose things that soothe you, engage you, help you, not things that agitate you and distress you. But also within that, remember the embodiment. We are wired to move. When we move our body, we move our mind. When we flex our body, we flex our mind. Structure helps, not like a police state, but having a plan, putting time in for loss orientation, for restoration orientation, and having limits. That we have a good no is vital. I say to everybody, what is your yes worth if you never say no? And finally, the thing that I think is really helpful is Gendlin's felt sense. We find too many words. The felt sense gets us into the wisdom of our bodies that can speak for us. So my final thought is, if we stay with this work, we grow. Not despite the loss, but because of it. The very thing we feared would destroy us is the very thing that heals us. It is a catalyst for gratitude and deeper spiritual connection. Hope reemerges not just as a feeling, but a direction and a belief that we can make it happen. So how do we heal? We learn that the people and life we love will die, but love does not. We grow through loss. We expand capacity to live, to love, and to be fully present.